Mr. Nimesh Kampani, the chairman of the JM Financial Group. Mr. Kampani, as you all know, is a doyen of capital markets, and he's going to talk to us and he's going to give some bright ideas on fostering India's growth through capital market. Mr. Kampani.
Good afternoon, friends, Mr. Hasmukh Bhai, and distinguished panelists, and all my friends. I just got 10 minutes, so I think my job is going to be very difficult. But I'm going to focus on capital markets. First of all, what is capital markets? The capital market is a place where there is a demand for funds and there's a supply for funds. And investment banks like us and others are intermediaries who work on those people who have demand for funds and also work on the supply side with investors to make sure that we match demand and supply both for the customer and also for the investor. And what we need to do in this process is to do a fair, transparent, and a good job. So in the longer run, investor makes money. Because unless investor makes money, the cycle will not work. And you must have all noticed, in the last about 5 years what happened. Because of the policy of the previous government and because of the non-transparency on various issues, I think the stock market and the capital market was on a standstill. Now, how do we correct this situation? And for that, if I just want to go back a little bit to see that in the last 10 years, totally 26 lakhs crores were collected from the capital market. And out of this 26 lakhs crore, 5 lakhs was equity and balance 21 lakhs was debt. And above, and on that, 5 lakhs crore, IPO accounted for about 30%, which was 1.5 lakh crore. QIP was 27%, which was 1.4 lakh crore, and FPO and OFS was 25%, about 1.3 lakh crore. Now, if you really look at this 5 lakhs crore of equity raising, is it enough? Can we do this, what growth we want to achieve? Which means on an average, is about 50,000 crore per year. Is about just about less than $10 billion. And that too also, if you notice, in the last 3 to 4 years, the money which was raised was much lower. Therefore, you take a 5 years average, that figure will come down substantially. Now, if you see, the FII owns about 23% of the market capitalization in this country. And they also hold 40% of the public float, that means I am removing the promoter share into this. That means FII plays a very important role, in financing some of the investments which is required in India. Now, with the economic slowdown which has happened in last about 5 years, what really has happened, the fixed capital formation also has fallen. And that needs to be corrected. And I think this government in a 6 months' time have done a fantastic job of giving clarity. The finance minister also in the opening remark or in the morning his address mentioned to us that how the government is taking corrective steps on a policy issue. So what does the investor want? If investor wants to invest in the capital market, he wants very clear direction on the policy. He wants transparency. He wants a good governance. He wants liquidity. And then he is willing to come into the country. That is whether domestic or foreign. But the foreigner wants one more thing. They also want stable exchange rate. Because it shouldn't happen that they start losing money on the exchange rate because of the depreciating rupee. So I think these are some of the things, we must really think about. Now, another issue which I want to focus is this, that the government also has a fiscal deficit pressure. Because if the growth had to come, somebody asked question in the morning that why government is not spending money. But government has a tremendous pressure because the fiscal deficit was 6.5% which has now come down to 4.6%, but, it requires to be brought down further. And therefore, the government coffer, is under pressure, and they cannot take large projects and then, spend money and the growth can come back. Maybe the public sector undertaking, could do this job, and they can, take up the newer projects, on that basis. Now look at the private sector, what has happened in last 5 years. There are broken private sector balance sheet. The companies have borrowed substantial money, from the banking sector, and they are in trouble. They have built a very good assets. They have built either a cement plant, airport, port, other assets, infrastructure assets, power projects or road projects. But what has happened? They are not able to meet their EBITDA level, and they are having a lot of difficulties. Maybe the policy clearances were not there. Suppliers are not making payment, by some of the agencies, and the cash flow system is just not working. And therefore, some of the private sector company has a huge debt, and because of this, the non-performing assets of the bank has substantially gone up, which is around 4.5% of their borrowings, of the lending, which is about 3.24 lakh crores of rupees. But if you take a stress asset, because some of the stress assets are being restructured, and that figure is about 10.7%, which is about 7.7 lakh crore of rupees. That means this is very important from the banking industry sort of point of view. But what are the good news? Some of the good news are, IMF is believing that India in 2015 will grow at 6.5%. So that is, hope. And we all live in hope. And hopefully, if, some quick work is done, as the Prime Minister was mentioning, take a quick step, I think we can come back, on a further growth asset. Now, what has happened in the banking? All these stressed assets are concentrated in a few sectors. What are those sectors? Infrastructure, metal and mining, textile, and aviation. This contributes 52% of non-performing asset, with 24% share in a total loan. So these sectors, I think we should first focus, because what I am saying is that if you want to bring the growth, and any new investment will take at least a cycle of 3 to 4 years. Therefore, debottlenecking of the existing project is a must. And how do you debottleneck the existing project and put them into stream? One, with the government policy, and hopefully in the next 3 to 4 months' time, we will know very clearly on a coal, on the power sector, on the supply of raw material, all those things, hopefully government will take care of it. But what happens on a financing side? And therefore, what I am saying, that we need the growth capital. Hasmukh Bhai mentioned about 50 lakhs crores of rupees per year, and that is a substantial amount. Now, if you just look at the macro picture, our economy is around $2 trillion. We say we have a 30% savings rate. That means we have a $600 billion of domestic savings. Where does it go? It goes into the gold, or it may go into the bank deposit, or it goes into real estate. It hardly comes into the capital market. But if you want to grow the economy, the government will have to think about how to incentivize the capital markets so that this domestic savings goes into the capital market for growth. Otherwise, they are all going into unproductive assets. So I think that's very, very important and very clear in my mind, that we have a savings and we need these savings to go into the capital market for growth. What used to happen in the past? No government has really thought about a strategy on how to bring the equity investment. Olden days, we used to have some 8ICC section where any new issue, if you invest, up to 50,000 rupees, you get some deduction. I think we talked about in this seminar or in Vibrant Gujarat that what benefit we should give it to industry. They should put up a project. They should do this. They should do this. But there is nothing for capital markets. There are no incentives for capital market for people to save money. I think that is the most important thing the government should think. That what sort of an incentive we should give it to individuals, to invest in the capital market and equity market. We can discuss a lot on that, but I'll just leave this thought because the Hasmukh Bhai sitting here from the Ministry of Finance, maybe that message can, go to them. Now, on this basis, this capital is required. Now, let's look at who is going to provide this capital. I have categorized into 3 types of investor. The category A investor are the insurance company, especially life insurance company and general insurance company and a private insurance company are a backbone to the equity market. As the Mr. Roy who is sitting here mentioned that LIC is the biggest investor in the country today. And I think they do a tremendous and fantastic job. But, we need more such investor. The private insurance companies are coming in, but over a period of time, they will invest. Second is a pension fund. But I am told that Labor Department or Provident Fund, where the Labor Ministry is not interested in putting money into equity. I would give a solution that, in United States of America, there are various plans where the individual decides that out of his provident fund or a pension fund, what percentage should go into equity. And he has to write that letter. There should be a letter coming from them and we should respond to that. And then once they say that 20% of my savings in a provident fund or a pension fund should be invested in equity. And if that is clearance is given and he writes down very clearly that I am willing to take a risk, and that means equity is a risk investment. It can go up or it can go down. But risk and return both goes together. Therefore, if you want a better return, then you go to take a risk. And if those investors are willing to take a risk, I think government should do a very, very clear message to the ministries that this should be allowed to be invested if the saver is willing to do that. So I think that will open up a provident fund sector and a pension sector in a very big way in the equity market. I would even go to an extent of saying that initially, they may even say that you can invest in a new issue so that new issue market then get, substantially channelized, on that basis. The third investor which I have put here is the foreign direct investments, because that comes from the partners or the people who wants to come and put up the project. Again, now the flavor is much better for India, so we expect that investment to come in. But one category which we have missed out here is the endowment trust, charitable and religious trust and institutions. If you look at United States of America, all endowment funds, university, or private endowment, trust, like Bill Gates Trust, they are investing in equities also. Their surplus money which they have not done charity yet. In India, Section 11 of Income Tax Act does not allow us to invest in equity. I am making a recommendation that we allow up to 15% or 20% of the trust corpus into equity. Let balance 80% be in the bank deposits or wherever it is. And India also wants greater charity. So if this investment appreciates and the trust and endowment sells this, they will get substantial capital appreciation because there is no borrowing in this trust. That means there is no stress. And when the borrowing is not there in this institution, they can invest for 5 years and 10 years. And all equity, a reasonably good equity, gives substantial return over a period of 5 to 10 years. And when they disinvest, they'll get substantial money. Again, they can do more charity, on that basis. So my recommendation is that the government should think about very seriously to open up. Just to give you the history, Hasmukh Bhai, why this was banned in 1962 by the government in the Income Tax Act. Because, again, the Gujarat is a leader. Those days we had a 90% tax and 70% tax rate. And so, some of the industrialists from Gujarat created a sort of various trust and avoided the paying of tax. So all the trusts were not allowed to invest in equities. Then second category which I have put in is a private equity fund, mutual funds, commercial banks, state financial institution, and foreign portfolio investor. The foreign portfolio investor mostly comes in secondary market. So I would like them to be excluded for growth because they only buy the secondary share. And a third is the day trader. So I would then like to say that I am making one important recommendation, which is a final recommendation, that to take care of the non-performing assets of the bank, there is today one strategy. Under the SLR rules, 22% should be, in a government security of the outstanding deposit. Today it's about 26.5% from banking sector. This 26.5%, and Reserve Bank says up to 5% of your deposit you can invest in the capital market, and which is only today about 90,000 crore, is only 1% of their bank deposit. What I am saying is this, that is excess of government security, they should slowly disinvest, and a bank should consider that investing another 3% over a period of next 3 to 5 years into equity, especially into the projects where they are funded. Because if they are funded and these are become a non-performing assets, this equity investment will make those projects viable. If they are viable, then only they should invest. They should do that due diligence and study on that. And then those investments which they have made in equity of those company either should get listed, and they are already listed company, over a period of time they should disinvest from them. And even if they recover the money or some profit, it will be better than just writing off those non-performing assets in the books. While selling 26% to come down to 22%, the government security, they will make substantial profit because there is a tremendous demand for government security today from a foreign sector. And this is because of the interest is likely to come down. And therefore, I am making a suggestion that this will give us 3% of the outstanding bank deposit, about 2,40,000 crore will come into the capital market. And that could be sort of invested, and to make sure that non-performing assets of the bank are taken care of, from this strategy. I think I don't have a time. I've started getting all these things to stop my lecture. So thank you very much. I believe that capital market can play a lot of role, and with the government policies are changing, we will see a new phase of growth in the capital market. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kampani. Should I now request Mr. Pradeep Shah, he is the chairman of Ind-Asia Fund Advisors, to talk about the International Finance Service Center. He's going to talk about the GIFT City concept and how can we boost up the IFCs in India. Mr. Pradeep Shah.
Thank you, Dr. Adya. Under the dynamic leadership of our Prime Minister Modi and his government, the financial services sector, which includes banking, insurance, securities dealing, and asset management, will be required to play a dual role going forward. Firstly, as a lubricant of the high growth that the government is aiming at, and secondly, as an engine of growth itself. Now, as a lubricant of high growth, this sector will have to change and lead the change. So, for instance, that required as the economy changes, it will be required to change, and that will lead, for instance, to greater use of quasi-equity or mezzanine financing, which we have not seen very much of today. Loans linked to floating rate and cost of capital rather than fixed rate, to make it feasible for banks to provide long-term finance for infrastructure. America was built on 30-year money, by the way. And venture debt financing for early-stage companies, and also harnessing technology for efficient, affordable, and inclusive banking. As an engine of growth, I've been a strong advocate since 1999 of creating an international financial services center in India. Now, this center can serve three objectives. The first is to serve the Indian diaspora by offering them a place for accumulating savings in a safe, well-regulated environment, a place with contemporary technology and contemporary expertise so that they can invest that money wisely, and a politically stable, well-governed state so they can pass on that savings to their next generation in a safe manner. The second objective is to create jobs in India. And the third objective is to generate additional revenues for India. Note, I'm not asking for any tax concessions or taking away tax revenues from the government of India. So as a service to the Indian diaspora, consider this. India had to overnight airlift thousands of people from Libya, from Iraq. Today, we have $70+ billion being remitted by non-residents from, say, places like Saudi Arabia. We have 1.8 million people working there. United Arab Emirates, 1.75 million people. Qatar, 550,000. Oman, 670,000. Kuwait, 580,000 people. These are stable environments so far. But and because they are stable environments, our diaspora invest the money in local banks. They don't bring it necessarily to India. They do remit when they need to. But if something were to happen, a lot of money would be at risk apart from their lives, and we've brought people back safely. Now in London, what happens? Typically the non-domiciles who do not pay tax on their overseas income work in London, pay tax on their income in London, but all the other money is parked in Jersey or Channel Islands and so on. They do it for tax reasons. But we think our Indian diaspora would be very happy to put money in a safe environment such as an IFSC in India where they can accumulate savings. Remember, in 2008, in the global financial crisis, people were very happy to put money into State Bank of India rather than Citibank in the United States. Then the second objective of creating jobs in India, consider this. Ireland in 1987 started an international financial services center with the objective of, quote, to create jobs, unquote. It now employs about 32,700 people directly and contributes 7.8% to the Irish GDP. In Britain, out of 1.1 million people employed in the financial services sector, 338,000 work in providing offshore services to people outside. In fact, currently, the GDP from the financial services sector in Britain is about 12.6%, which is several times higher than the lowest in the G7 countries and substantially higher than the next highest, which is Canada. In India, by the way, banking and insurance only account for 5.9% of the GDP. So Britain has this relatively high proportion of financial service sector because it also has the highest share of financial services exports. In fact, it generated a record trade surplus of $61 billion, which is over twice as much as the trade surplus, the entire trade surplus of a country like Switzerland or United States. Not only that, the value of the UK financial services exports at $83 billion is more than 3 times the tourist spend in the UK at 26 billion pounds. 83 billion pounds, I'm sorry, and 26 billion pounds. Now, even United States, another developed country, also has this strategy of serving the offshore diaspora. So, for instance, it has the Marshall Islands, which is an offshore zone. And Delaware has 945,000 companies registered there. The fees from that allow Delaware to not charge a sales tax. Switzerland manages $2.1 trillion of offshore money. Britain and its Channel Islands and Caribbean islands manage $1.9 trillion. Singapore, which has come in from behind, now manages $1.3 trillion of offshore assets. Even the United States has over $600 billion of offshore assets. So eventually, our IFSC in GIFT can specialize. For instance, Dublin is popular with companies, Luxembourg with mutual funds, London, for instance, has a Baltic exchange. We can create, for instance, an oil rigs exchange or a renewable powers exchange where buyers and sellers can meet and trade. That way, we can work towards emulating these developed countries with the idea of an international financial services center for export of financial services. And as for the third objective, generating revenues for the government, all that this IFSC needs in respect of a tax regime is for its non-resident clients to be ring-fenced from domestic tax and FEMA regulations, which is what Ashish Chavan was talking about. No withholding tax, no capital gains tax, freedom to move money in and out of the IFSC and to invest anywhere in the world. Now, this is nothing new. We already have it in India. Non-resident Indians even today pay no Indian tax, no withholding tax on their NRO accounts or FCNR accounts and invest wherever they choose. Other non-residents who invest in this IFSC would have to disclose their income in their home country and pay taxes in their home country. The IFSC would be fully compliant with KYC, the Know Your Customer, and money laundering laws, and follow the best international practices in this regard, such as information exchange agreements. The IFSC would effectively generate tax income for the government from the income that these citizens who work in that IFSC and the companies that provide those services would earn on their income. Prime Minister Modi's government is not only making structural and administrative changes, but has also given new directional leads. Clean India, Make in India, Trust Your Citizens, Smart Cities. The IFSC would dovetail well with his vision, serve the non-resident Indian diaspora, create jobs in India, generate revenues for the government, and be an engine of growth for India. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pradeep. I think Pradeep has been helping the GIFT City in having the International Finance Service.
They are very near the customer. And that's why their turnaround time in responding to customer is much, much faster. These features make them stand apart. They also have relatively simpler processes. And some of the NBFCs also have developed technologies which are extremely suitable for reaching the customer. SMEs operate in many areas, NBFCs operate in many areas. They finance SMEs, they finance commercial vehicles, cars, two-wheelers, housing, construction, and other productive sectors of the economy. They have also developed them, diversified into other successful business models, being microfinance, which is an extremely important agenda for the Government of India, affordable housing, business correspondent, agricultural equipment, and infrastructure financing. So NBFCs today practically work in all the areas in which banks operate and areas in which, some of the areas in which banks do not operate. Microfinance has been looked upon as an extremely important means of financial inclusion. Mr. Kampani talked about capital markets. I do believe that in the foreseeable future or in the immediate future, in the next year or so, there will be lots of microfinance companies which will go to the capital markets. Microfinance sector faced a lot of difficulties 4 years ago. Since then, it has evolved. Regulations are in place now. They all operate within boundaries. They largely follow stricter discipline now. And this is an extremely important area for reaching lots and lots of people. So this is one area in which NBFCs play an extremely important role. It's not known, but it is a fact that there are several NBFCs which today operate in infrastructure financing. Sir, you mentioned in your talk about IIFCL. Yes, IIFCL is an important entity. However, there are others, apart from the public finance entities like the Power Finance Corporation, Rural Railway Finance Corporation. In the private sector also, there are specialized entities who work in infrastructure financing. And it's important to note that these NBFCs have participated in financing 1/3 of total infrastructure as far as the country is concerned. So they have played a very meaningful role. So it's important, it's good to know that you're working on making IIFCL big, ensuring that they participate more and more, but there are several others, and our request to you is that all of them should be treated on par, and there should be really no differentiation. The other important point which I want to mention, there are several announcements which the government has made. In the last budget, there were announcements made. Subsequent to that, Reserve Bank of India has also come out with some regulatory flexibility for banks. These NBFCs also deserve similar flexibility because they are doing the same thing. They are financing same projects, they are financing the same customers. Whereas this differentiation between two classes of lenders is not really desirable. They're playing an extremely meaningful role in this. So infrastructure financing is a very important area in which NBFCs can play a meaningful role. One point which is also not known, renewable energy is a very major thrust area for the Government of India. Some of the NBFCs have made a very meaningful role in financing renewable energy. There are several projects, and this is an extremely good area to lend because the projects are relatively small in size, risks are limited, and you can measure the risk, you will know the results in just about 5-6 months of time. So a lot of good work has been done in the area of renewable energy, and this is one area which NBFCs can partner with banks and work along with them. Last point relating to NBFCs is that we have always thought NBFCs and banks as competitors. I have mentioned to Madam and some others in the past, I think it is possible that there is a facilitation process through which NBFCs and banks can become partners in progress. And we can develop a model. Today, in terms of consortium financing, it is done, but there are several other areas in which this also can be done. I want to mention a few points for your kind consideration on behalf of the NBFC sector. Just 2 minutes. Reserve Bank of India has recently come out with regulations for NBFCs. These are extremely good. Tighter regulations, new regime, we welcome all of them. However, our submission is that they should be on level playing basis. That means if we have risk weightages for the banks while evaluating a proposal, similar flexibility, rating-based risk weightages should be available to NBFCs who are working in the same area. So this will help them to grow tremendously. Similarly, all NBFCs are treated on par. They are asset financing companies, infrastructure financing companies. There is a case for differentiating some of them based on the type of assets which they lend. The other important point, and that has been a sore point as far as this particular sector is concerned, and that is taxability, tax deductibility of provisions. When banks make provision for non-performing assets, they are deductible for the purpose of tax. When NBFC makes same provisions, they are not allowed for tax purposes. So my point is that considering the fact that this is an extremely important sector which is contributing to the growth in the economy, we should have similar provisions, similar flexibility available. SARFAESI provisions are available to banks, but they're not available for non-banking finance companies. So my submission to you, sir, that considering the fact that this particular sector is playing an extremely important, useful role in reaching several millions of Indians, also all parts of the country, a more facilitative role will help in the growth of this sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Devasthali. I think we have finished the presentations of all the 8 speakers. Each one of them was very exciting, and personally, if I tell you, I've learned a lot from whatever suggestions have come from all the experts here, and I'm sure we'll take the benefit of these suggestions for policy formulation whenever we have to do that. So with this, I think we can have 10 minutes of interaction. Quickly, please identify yourself and also start by saying who do you want to ask your question to out of the panelists, okay? So about 10 minutes. Can all the mics be ready? Yes, please. The lady there, the lady there.
Good afternoon, sir.
1 minute, the lady there, yeah.
Good afternoon, and thanks to all the speakers for such a wonderful speeches and presentations. My question is, myself Shilpa Pandya, a development consultant. My question is to Mr. Roy from LIC. I just wanted to know LIC's plan for development of microinsurance, especially because LIC being a kind of synonym for insurance in Indian population, there is a huge potential to tap the captured market of the population through microinsurance. Though
Okay.
I know LIC has some
Not now,
product.
not now, Mr. Roy. We'll reply to all of them at the
Yeah,
end.
so LIC's plans for
Yeah,
microinsurance.
Sure.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Person here? You can just note down and, yeah. Please.
My name is Anil Chaturvedi. I've come from Switzerland to attend the Vibrant Gujarat Summit. I left India about 30 years back. I was here a banker, and I've been a banker for 40 years, having lived in India and America and Switzerland. My question, in fact, my two observations, which I think would be useful to the panel and all the people
Very
here.
brief, huh? Very brief,
Yes.
please.
Two observations here. One is that nobody has commented upon the strength of the Indian rupee versus all the currencies in the world. Over the last 7 months, since the Modi government came into being, Indian currency has appreciated by about 10% against British pounds, euros, Swiss francs, Canadian dollars, Australian dollars. It has remained fairly stable versus US dollars, and I think this would be a major incentive for people to look at when they are investing into India, because Indian currency has shown its strength and resilience at a time when global economies are weakening. A second positive factor here is that according to the World Bank report of May 2014, the size of the Indian GDP at this time is about $5.9 trillion, going by the purchasing power parity. India today ranks number 3 in the world after USA, China. We are number 3. We are way ahead of all the European countries, including Canada and Japan and other countries. So these are two observations I thought they'll be there. Number 3 is that currently there are about $3 trillion sitting with pension funds in Switzerland. They are looking for investment opportunities. They are willing to invest into Indian debt instruments. And I think we can work with the government of India to channelize these into infrastructure projects.
Okay. That's an observation. Yes, please. Quickly. Yeah. Please give a mic here. Yeah. You can speak louder. Maybe we can hear you out. Yeah.
Hello, sir. I am Dishant here. I am a financial consultant, Ahmedabad based in the name of Bijex Advisors. My specific question is regarding to the gift city. Many things has been said about the infrastructure of the gift city, but very few in the public know about the legal sanctity of the gift city. Whether it will be so far as I understand, there are 3 status of a international financial center. First, it will be an offshore center for the Indian companies to operate global level. Whether global companies can manage their funds at the gift city. Or third, where the global contracts, which are not permitted in Indian regulations, can be exchanged or transacted. What will be your vision? Gift city will be of these status in next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, I'll reply to that question. Anybody else? 1 or 2 more, then we'll finish. Yeah. 1 or 2 more. Well, I think the gentleman there, then here. Yeah, please. या वहाँ पर दे दो जरा लास्ट में नहीं वहाँ पर लास्ट में दे दो वहाँ हाँ राइट प्लीज या
May I, sir?
या प्लीज
Sir, I'm Arun Mehta, sir. My question is to Mr. Nimesh Kampani. Rather than banks intermediate, on behalf of the small depositor for investing in the equity market, will it not be better to bring the retail investor directly back so that they can also get the gains of the equity market?
Did you understand the question, Mr. Kampani? You are free to speak in Gujarati also, huh? Anybody, because most of them are Gujarati thing.
Sir, you said that banks can invest further amounts in the equity market, which is just 1% right now. In that case, the small investor, the small depositor doesn't get the returns from the equity market. It's the bank that makes the money. What can the people do for bringing the retail investor in the equity market back, who has already left the market? That was my question.
Okay, you understood the question? Later. Yeah, later. Just one or two more. Yes, the gentleman here in the headgear. Yeah.
I am coming from in the Rajasthan and chairman of the State Cattle Commission of Rajasthan government. My questions, ये डेयरी एंड माइक्रो फाइनेंस के अंदर जो नॉन बैंकिंग के जो सिस्टम्स है वो तो चल रहे हैं, मगर इसके अंदर एग्रीकल्चर में, डेयरी में जो फाइनेंसिंग कंपनियां काम करती है, आज हमारे पास में जो डेयरी है हमने किसी से फाइनेंस नहीं लिया है, मगर पर डे 2 लाख लीटर्स दूध प्रोडक्शन, 1 लाख काउस इज मैनेज माई एरिया. तो ये इसके लिए मेरा आपसे निवेदन है कि अपन नॉन बैंकिंग फाइनेंस वाले यदि टेक्निकली अनुभव दे, आज पूरे 3 दिन से देख रहा हूँ कि यहाँ पर अभी इंडियन जो सिस्टम को समझने वाला, आप समझते हैं, हम समझते हैं, हम आपस में एक दूसरे को समझा रहे हैं. समझाना किसे? इंडियंस को समझाना, गांव वालों को समझाना है. गांव के लिए माइक्रो फाइनेंस की क्या स्कीम्स है, गांव के व्यक्ति को 90% गांव के व्यक्ति को कुछ मालूम नहीं है. कृषि भवन बने हुए हैं, बैंकें बनी हुई, बड़ी बड़ी बैंकें बनी है, गांव का आदमी नहीं जाता है. और गांव के आदमी को जो बेनिफिट और फाइनेंस मिलना चाहिए, जो बहुत कुछ कर सकता है, उसको नहीं मिलता है. इसलिए इसको माइक्रो फाइनेंस को गांव से, विलेज से जोड़ करके इसका एक सिस्टम का प्रचार होना चाहिए, एक ट्रेनिंग होना चाहिए. गांव के व्यक्ति को ट्रेनिंग नहीं मिलता है, तो ये माइक्रो फाइनेंस के सिस्टम को बढ़ावा देते हुए गांव के डेवलपमेंट और छावों की holistic development, इससे करना चाहिए.
Good. Yeah, last person here. No, now I think we are done. The last one. Absolutely last.
Sir, I am Anuj Bhandari from View Bhandari Landmarks, Pune. I am developing the first residential project at The Gift. We are just starting in few days. Sir, you have talked about the labor laws reforms. It's a very good thing. Being in the construction industry, I think the construction is the second largest employer of labor. And we are in shortage.
But I think that's not the topic today, labor laws.
Yeah, I'm coming to one point that I request
if you have
the
a question
construction industry
yeah,
to be declared as industry status so that we can get lower cost of fund, which is the real requirement.
Construction industry as what? To be declared as?
Industry status.
To be declared as industry.
Yeah.
But I don't think construction industry is getting finance at a higher cost than industry.
Yes, it is at the higher rate of interest.
I don't think so. Anyway, but anyway, that's a suggestion.
Excuse me, sir.
No.
Excuse me, sir.
Acha, okay, last one.
Excuse me, sir.
James.
Sir, here. Sir, a last question, please.
नहीं, यहाँ पर है, संजीव को दो. कौन? एक माइक यहाँ दो भाई. बाद में. Over the lunch. Okay.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, most of the people would know me, but I am a financial advisor to Government of Gujarat's various companies. Also, I run a company called NextGen. So my question is that in Gujarat, I remember that we started in 2001 or so. At the time, there was a little loss making companies in Gujarat, energy sector and all that. We followed a model which was a typical model called public-private partnership. We were almost the initiators of that. This is almost a similar situation that we see at the central level now. We are actually going out of that model of public-private partnership and we are wanting to get into the model of EPC. What public-private partnership allows typically is to bring in a lot of capital, bring in a lot of private sector partners, and actually give 3 to 5 years for infrastructure building typically where the money gets invested, by which time the productivity returns and a lot of money can be repaid back. That model which we followed in Gujarat with all of you people there now at the center, do you not think that that's a very viable model? And we've tried and tested that model of growth here in Gujarat, converting all our companies, energy sector, into some of the most profitable ones here. And following that model, don't you think the country itself will go leaps and bounds, sir? And we'll be able to build that model instead of going to EPC and all, sir. That's just my question and what I think.
It's a suggestion. We'll look into it. Mr. Roy on micro-insurance and reply to that.
Sir,
Can I?
Sir,
I think it's done.
I have
it's
a quick
done.
question
Please,
for Mr.
please
Pradeep
sit down.
Shah.
We don't have time. Please.
Sir, can I
I think.
Can I- one last point?
I think.
Please,
Please
please.
permit me to answer
Sorry.
answer the question.
One last suggestion, if you
No more suggestions, please. Please keep your mic down. Yeah, please. We'll just get along.
Mrs. Shilpa Pandey asked me a question about micro insurance. Actually, the theme today was money, and that is a question of money to people. But it's relevant because large sections of the population are to be reached out to be enabled to be covered by the benefits of life insurance, and maybe micro insurance is the most optimum method by which it can be done. Madam, we have a fairly large micro insurance operation. We had some operational issues which all have been now attended to. As days go by, this will be a very, very highly growing segment of coverage that will be seen by the life insurance industry in the country. I'm sure about that. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Kampani.
See, what I suggested was for the bank to take care of their non-performing assets and invest in equity. It is not a sort of that they regularly invest in a secondary market. It's only for a primary market they should do it so that no new growth comes in. Secondary market buying and selling, is a different issue altogether. As far as a retail investor is concerned, they can directly come in the market. They are not stopped today. There are rather SEBI is giving them a preferential treatment on certain cases, and therefore they should continue to do that. But if some incentive is given to retail investor by the Income Tax Act, then their flow in the equity market will be better.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll respond to the question on GIFT City. In fact, the GIFT City concept, International Finance Center in GIFT City, the whole idea is that it is being developed as a financial center which could become an alternative to, say, Mumbai. Because Mumbai is already congested. There are too many financial institutions, all of them located in Mumbai. And when one wants to have a better quality of life and have better space, and also the concept of walk to work. I mean, you have the residential complex there and you are able to walk to your workplace. I mean, this is something which many of the bankers are looking for. So this is a city which is being developed in a big area of 800 acres. And there are two components of GIFT City. One is the domestic financial center and another is International Finance Center, which is part of the Special Economic Zone. In fact, it has been declared as the financial SEZ under the SEZ Act of Commerce Ministry. The only thing is that for the GIFT City Financial Center to be operationalized, the rules have to be framed by Ministry of Commerce and Ministry of Finance. Now we are in the process of formulating these rules. This is the Department of Economic Affairs, not the Department of Financial Services in which I am there. But we are all working together, the Department of Economic Affairs and our department, to formulate the rules for International Finance Center. Once these rules are formulated, it will be possible for any Indian bank or a foreign bank to be located in International Finance Center to give the loans sanctioned for external commercial borrowing. So it is as good as an offshore banking center within the country. Right now also offshore banking center rules are there, but that is only for the SEZ. You cannot do funding of non-SEZ unit in India out of the SEZ offshore banking unit. So this will liberate it further, so you can do all the ECB loans sitting in GIFT City. That means that State Bank of India doesn't have to necessarily open a branch in Dubai to give ECB lending to Indian companies. They can do it sitting in GIFT City. So this is what will be permitted. The second is it will be developed as a hub of insurance also. So right now, the reinsurance market is not in India. It is all located in either Singapore or London or some other place. So once GIFT City comes into being, the International Finance Center portion, then it will be possible to have complete reinsurance done in India. And there will be an entire reinsurance market which will develop there. And of course, the third part is capital markets. So the idea is that we are also in discussion with SEBI that it should be possible to have an exchange, the capital market exchange within the GIFT City, in which there is a trading of foreign stocks in dollars. That is possible. Instead of having these exchanges in New York or Shanghai, we could have an exchange in which dollar traded stocks are traded. Dollar denominated stocks are traded. So these are the three things which will become possible the moment the rules are announced. And we are in the process of formulation of rules, and you can hope to get some good news as early as possible. Thank you very much. So with this, we are ending this seminar. I must thank my colleague, Mr. Jayan Singh, who is the Additional Chief Secretary of Finance in Gujarat, and his colleague and my former colleague, Ms. Aparna, who is the Principal Secretary of Economic Affairs, and Mr. Sanjeev Kumar, who is the Secretary of the Expenditure Department, and the entire team of Finance Department of Gujarat for having, and also GIFT City, they were also sponsor for this event. So I would like to thank all of them for making this huge effort. Yes, I must mention, it has never been mentioned since morning, that this is one seminar which is jointly sponsored by Ministry of Finance, Government of India, as well as by Government of Gujarat, and the CII, of course. So it's a joint seminar. We thank everybody. Thank you very much. Please join us for lunch.
As a token of appreciation and memory of this summit, we offer mementos to the eminent dignitaries on the dais, and for that I request Shri Avichal Khera, Chief Financial Officer, GIFT, to please come on the dais and present the memento first of all to Srimati Arundhati Bhattacharya. I request Shri Avichal Khera ji to please come forward and present the memento to Srimati Arundhati Bhattacharya. Shri S.K. Roy, Shri Y.M. Deostle, and Ms. Kaku Nakahate. I also request Shri Dipesh Shah, Vice President, GIFT City, to please come on the dais and present the mementos to Ms. Marriott Mullier, Shri Ashish Kumar Chauhan, Shri Nimesh Kampani. We are grateful to all the dignitaries on the dais for their valuable time. We are also thankful to Ministry of Finance, Government of India, and Finance Department, Government of Gujarat, for organizing this seminar. We are thankful to all the participants of the seminar, our national partner, Confederation of Indian Industry, organizers, Index B and GIFT City, knowledge partner, KPMG. Last but not the least, entire crew for their support to make this event a great success. Thank you all. Jai Hind, Jai Jai Garvi Gujarat. We request you all to join for lunch. Have a good day.